miles of fence. We have spent billions of dollars trying to harden the border by virtue of technology. Still have a ways to go. But I think everyone agrees that if we're going to deal with comprehensive immigration reform, a central pillar of it has to be doing a better job of protecting our border. But I think also we must deal with those who are here now. And the Senate bill, which I support, provides a path to earned legalization over 15 years, paying of fines, paying of taxes, learning English, learning civics, maintaining an otherwise clean record. That is not amnesty. That is dealing with a deeply, deeply difficult issue to deal with in what I consider to be a fair and humane and even-handed fashion. So that's what I support.
I do not support the president after the election issuing executive amnesty. I really don't like the fact that it was, that the president was primed to do it and he decided to do it, that this was going to wait until after the election. You can't really get much more partisan than that. There's a lot of partisanship down in Washington. As I mentioned earlier, Republicans blaming Democrats, Democrats blaming Republicans. The fact of the matter is, with this immigration issue, that there was one party rule during the president's first term in office, and this reform wasn't passed then. The Senate has passed a piece of legislation that I don't support in the House, and I believe that we have a bicameral Congress. Just because the Senate passes something doesn't mean that the House needs to pass it in that form, and vice versa. I believe that the first step is doing a better job securing our borders. The president, 30 years ago, President Reagan tried to fix all of our immigration challenges at once, and his critics then said that this effort may actually result in an immigration crisis that is exponentially larger than what it was then, and that's exactly how things have played out now. The key is you have to, when you have a leak, the first thing you do is you turn off the faucet, you don't take out a mop. And so securing our borders is first. Secondly is, Congress, in all of the dysfunction and all of the partisanship, is trying to solve hundreds and thousands of different challenges related to immigration in one piece of legislation. Why is it that we can't get any type of progress where liberals and conservatives agree, where Republicans and Democrats agree? I'm all in support of our legal immigration process. What about improving our visa system? What about people who come here who get educated and they get their master's degree and their PhDs, and employers want to hire them and they have to go home, but they want to stay? There are ways within our immigration system to reduce the amount of people who are here illegally once you secure our borders in a way that everyone can agree with, putting partisanship aside. So I happen to think that the second step is seeing where we can find agreement, as opposed to holding hostage every single component of the immigration crisis to try to solve 2,000 different challenges in one piece of legislation. Congress can't get stuff done when they're trying to fix 4 problems at once. I don't like the fact that they're trying to solve 1,000 and they're getting nothing done.
Thank you. John?
Hello, my name is John Keeshan, and I have a question about home insurance and property insurance. Maybe I should ask you, Fred. You're so long over there, nobody's.
You're going to get a chance. He's coming up.
Oh, okay. You're doing such a good job, nobody wants to ask you. But anyway, I don't know if this is a state or federal, but clearly I'm sure everybody in Montauk, particularly in a coastal area like this, has been affected. Their property insurance has doubled or tripled. When you go to your agent after you get that surprise bill, they're at a loss. They can't. They're upset that they can't offer you an alternative. And to me, when you ask that question, they say, well, the insurance is controlled by the government, whoever that is, whether it's state or federal, and they keep getting requests for 20 and 30% increases granted to them by the various agencies that control this, at the expense of property owners who are virtually unable to meet these premiums and conceivably are at risk of losing their property as a result. The
Question?
yeah. So, well, my question is, what can be done about this to control this, so that people can still afford to get property insurance to protect their homes?
Do you want to ask either of them, or?
Anybody like to answer that question is welcome.
There's only one piece of this that's federal, and that is the federal flood insurance program. Federal flood insurance, there was a bill passed into law. That's right, we passed a bill into law that tried to address a growing shortfall in the flood insurance trust fund. And it did so, though, in a way that dramatically increased premiums. People, quite understandably, went nuts. Congress came back and we undid that bill and passed a bill that created a much more moderate path to trying to see to it that the trust fund remain funded so that it can begin to deal with the claims. The trust fund right now is, I think, about $30 or $40 billion in the hole. But at least as it relates to the federal flood insurance program, Congress created a problem, recognized the problem, and fixed it. Did all of this in the last, I think, 15 months. So if your question relates to flood insurance, we have fixed an issue that would have given people significant increases. They're not getting them any longer, at least as it relates to the federal flood insurance program.
I wrote legislation. Something, Phil, I don't know if were you the assembly sponsor of our bill that you can't discriminate against? You co-sponsored it. Yeah, so we introduced legislation up in Albany because you have insurance companies discriminating and not even offering policies to people who live too close to the water. So people are having trouble gaining insurance policies at all, let alone the fact that people are finding the challenge of paying their bills. So that I think is one component, is the heightened level of discrimination. It's it's one thing if you want to factor in a location to a particular flood zone. It's another thing if someone can't even obtain insurance, and a lot of policies getting canceled, they're not able to re-up. Secondly, is I think that the maps that are created, in some respect, you might find homes in areas where it's appropriately mapped by the federal government, and in other components, you have houses that are in that shouldn't be. So you're seeing these huge fluctuations in flood insurance rates. My house, went from being in to out of a zone. This is right before Sandy. Just a new map comes out. My flood insurance policy went from $2,700 a year to $400 a year. It just didn't make any sense. I didn't mind. My neighbors didn't mind. And Sandy came. For people who decided not to have flood insurance, they certainly paid the price. Third, I think homeowners having the ability to mitigate potential flood damage, being able to raise their homes, which is a key component of the state's New York Rising program. Administering a lot of the funds that were passed through Sandy, part of it is allowing people to raise their homes. I saw a street in Lindenhurst where the entire street was all damaged. All the houses were damaged except for the one house closest to the water, because that was the one house that was raised. So I think that that's part of it too. And another point that I would mention is hurricane deductibles. I mean, thank you that this was not a hurricane, as Superstorm Sandy was considered just under a hurricane, because people aren't sitting on $18,500 to pay their deductible. And another thing that I would offer is with regards to rebuilding after a storm, the Housing and Urban Development has rules in place where people have to come up with 50% of their costs. And then after the project's done, then they get the other 50%. The fact is, people can't afford to come up with their first 50%. So folks in low-income neighborhoods are still sitting in houses that have not been fixed after Sandy. So many different components to better address your challenge.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Zeldin, in the recent
What is your name?
Excuse me, David Weinstein. In the recent past, we've seen the Republican majority mantra of lowering taxes and lowering government expenses as a constant byline that they live by. In the recent past, we've seen consequences of that in terms of reduced benefits for veteran care, and we've seen that fiasco unfold. More recently, we've seen contributions to the World Health Organization reduced by 25%, incapacitating its ability to fully deal with the Ebola crisis. And right here at home, we've seen a reduced budget to the Center for Disease Control, which is also involved in Ebola. I'd like to know, sir, if you were elected to serve in our Congress and part of the Republican majority, you would vote to increase taxes and increase expenses to deal with those three areas: veterans care, the World Health Organization contribution, and the Center for Disease Control. Would you go against the leadership and vote to tax increases and increase benefits in those three areas?
Well, I do not support reducing benefits for our veterans. It's been an honor to serve alongside our nation's veterans and do everything in my power as a state senator up in Albany to fight for our veterans for more opportunity, to make sure they have a roof over their head and shoes on their feet, educational, vocational opportunities, that they aren't homeless, that they have the mental health services that they need to help them if they come back home with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. I actually think that with regards to the growing threat of Ebola, for example, that we need to be doing more regardless of whether you're a Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. I will say that Washington doesn't have a revenue problem. Washington has an expenditure problem, and I could tell you some specific examples. In Albany, the New York State Senate passed the Public Assistance Integrity Act, making it illegal for someone with an EBT card at 2 o'clock in the morning, if they're at a casino and they're down on their luck, to be able to use the ATM, take the cash, and go gamble on it. Or if they're at a strip club at 2 o'clock in the morning, to be able to use the ATM, swipe their card, and use the cash on a lap dance. Their EBT cards are being used legally in the state of New York. Legally in the state of New York on lotto, tobacco, alcohol. There is money to be saved. And we co-sponsored the legislation in the Senate to make that illegal. Our Medicaid program, you have individuals in Medicaid who are making tens of millions of dollars a year off the Medicaid program. I can tell you in New York State alone, you could save billions of dollars. And you know what? The federal government is responsible for coming up with half. So, just when you look at the overall federal budget, the fact that veterans would ever get held hostage, whether it is, with the debt limit debate, whether it's with the budgets that get passed, veterans have done so much to serve our country, willing to lay down their life in protection of our Constitution, freedoms, and liberties. When they come home, it's one thing to say thank you, an outstretched hand, and to give them a hug, but they should never be held hostage in any budget negotiation ever. I don't care whether I'm standing up to a Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. That's something that I feel very strongly about. And I believe that there are other areas of our federal government where there is low-hanging fruit where we can save money.
Mr. Zeldin, you didn't answer my question. I asked you whether you would vote against the Republican leadership in order to avoid these wrongs. Namely, would you vote to increase aid to the veterans? Would you vote to increase aid to the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control?
Again,
so yes or no?
And I answered it twice in my last answer, at the beginning and at the end. I said that I would stand up to my leadership if they ever tried to cut any benefits whatsoever to our veterans.
What about
So I'm sorry if the answer is, you came up to me beforehand, introducing yourself as a very active member of the local Democratic Party.
That's correct.
I appreciate your partisanship. I'm sorry you do not like my answer. But again, I will say for a fourth time, I am willing to stand up to my leadership if they would ever propose doing anything to hurt our veterans in any way, shape, or form.
Mr. Zeldin, I think it was a three-part question.
Yes.
And you answered the first part very well, by the way.
Thank you.
I will answer the other. I'll answer the other components for a multiple time again. As far as the Ebola crisis, it is highlighting the need to be able to invest in ensuring that that American people, Long Islanders, all across our country, we are doing everything in our power to protect the health and safety of our friends and our family in our community. And again, it does not matter what party you are. what your ideological background is. The federal government needs to be doing more to be addressing the Ebola outbreak. And that means you may have to increase funding. And just because you have to increase funding to the CDC or some other cause that will help us combat Ebola or the next outbreak. I am giving you specific examples of ways the federal government is spending way too much money. In the state of New York, 40% of our state budget is Medicaid. There are billions of dollars that you could save in Medicaid. The federal government pays for half of that. So if we need to come up with $50 million more or $50 billion more to fight certain causes that are worth fighting, it is easy for a politician to put their hand in your pocket and take more of your money. You know what's hard? Is being able to say no. To find a way in the MTA's budget, instead of passing an MTA payroll tax, to say, what are you doing to cut overtime costs, real estate consolidations, to operate more efficiently, to reduce your personal and miscellaneous service contracts? That's harder. When your local government comes to you and say they want speed cameras and red light cameras, which I vote against it all the time, they say it's for public safety, it's because they want more of your money, okay? There are some people who say that they support it for public safety. God bless them, but I will tell you that some of the people, local governments, who are coming up advocating for these speed cameras and red light cameras, I've had conversations with them. They are advocating for it because they want to put their hands in your pockets. The harder thing is finding ways for this government to operate more efficiently.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Alex Picciarello from East Hampton. I find as I sit here, more and more questions come to mind, and beginning with your opening 5 minutes, Mr. Congressman, whereby you suggest that you help your constituent, that one particular one, get $9,000 and do all the things necessary to get him back on track. And one of the questions came, well, do you go back to those agencies who originally wronged him and make those corrections necessary so the next guy in line doesn't have to do? That was one question. Coming down the line, you said something again here, something about Congress creates the problem, but we went back and we fixed it. Well, my problem with that is Congress is trying to do too much and they are creating problems. But my question ultimately came, and it's the one that survived all the other ones that I wanted to ask, was your response to the Affordable Care Act, and that you did many things within that legislation. But what makes you think, or why would you think, that the other side, as you put it, would want to help correct problems that are in it when it was fully supported by Democrats and not one Republican? Why would they come to that aid, if you will, to fix the problem you may very well have created?
I'll give you a little history before I answer that, okay? When we were debating the Affordable Care Act, I went back and read the congressional record for the debate on Medicare 50 years ago. And the arguments that were interposed against Medicare 50 years ago were almost identical, word for word, to the arguments that were being interposed against the Affordable Care Act. So let's stop for a second and think what this country would be like if those people who were opposing Medicare had won. Does anyone imagine healthcare in this country for seniors without Medicare?
Yes.
I can't.
No.
So, and by the way, we are still fixing Medicare. We're 50 years, we're still modifying it. We're still modifying Social Security. In any other mature legislative body, something that the House of Representatives is not right now under Republican leadership, we would be fixing that which is wrong and doing better about that which is good. But that's not what we're doing. The House of Representatives has voted 52 times to repeal, in full or in part, Obamacare. Now, one of those votes I happen to agree with. It was the one that would have reinstated policies that had been canceled. I thought that was the right thing to do, and I voted for that. But let's fix what's wrong. We all know what's wrong. Let's fix it. Let's not take an ideologically driven position that's designed to score political points and and say we gotta repeal. Because, you know, I hear my opponent talk about how he's concerned about cancel policy. May I
Why
finish?
wasn't that done during the legislative process?
Because firstly,
Coordination of the other.
I can't answer that. I can't answer, but I can tell you this. I served on one of the committees that had jurisdiction over the Affordable Care Act. We had what we call a markup, where we go through the legislation page by page. We considered, probably in our committee, 50 or 60 amendments that were offered, some by Democrats, some by Republicans. We passed some, we didn't pass others. But we passed, in our committee, lots of Republican amendments to the Affordable Care Act, and some Democratic amendments. Same thing happened in Ways and Means, same thing happened in Energy and Commerce. So the people who say that only one party shaped this law, that's simply not true. We had markups in all three of those committees. I think overall, there were something like 240 or 250 amendments that were considered, and some were passed and some were not. That's the normal legislative process. Okay? But here's my point. And by the way, the questions you're raising are legitimate questions to raise, but I hear my opponent bemoan the fact that policies were canceled. I do too. That was a mistake. We should have been able to fix it, and we tried to fix it, okay? But his solution, which is to repeal, cancels 13 million policies. Now, what do we say to those 13 million people? We were only kidding? Thanks for trying? You know, I mean, so it's a law that has helped people, and in some cases needs to work much, much better than it's working right now. I want to be a part of that process, and I'm determined to be a part of that process in a constructive, pragmatic way.
Looking for somebody who hasn't asked the question yet.
Over here.
Okay, sure.
Congressman Bishop, you just
What is
got
your
through-
name, please?
I'm sorry, my name is Steve Bondrone, I'm from Comac. You just got through saying that you are more than willing to be a part of a process that is going to fix the defects in Obamacare. In 2002, the Republican House had two proposals to tackle two problems which were overlooked in the original legislation, one of which was tort reform. You say you consulted with doctors. I can tell you from speaking with many, many dozens of doctors all throughout Long Island, there is not a single doctor that you will ever talk to who is not in favor of tort reform. We have seen that it has worked in Texas, we have seen it has worked in other places, and yet in 2012, the House passed a bill for very sensible tort reform. I believe that you voted against it, as did Congressman Israel. Also, in that same bill, there was a provision to get rid of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, known as IPAB. It's going to kick in January. Very few people know about this board. In essence, it is a rationing board. Let me get to my question. If the
Please.
Senate goes to Republican, and if we have a chance to actually get legislation to President Obama that will get rid of the IPAB and that will institute very necessary tort reform, will you again oppose these very necessary provisions to increase the effectiveness of the law and to make it better, which is what you just said you want to do, but I highly suspected you're going to block these bills once again. Tell me if I'm wrong.
First, let me say welcome to the East End. Nice to have you out here. I would say, first off, with IPAB, I am a co-sponsor of the bill that would eliminate IPAB. I do not support IPAB. I believe that, let me finish please, sir, I listen very politely. I think that members of Congress should be making decisions with respect to Medicare rates, and by the way, it is not a rationing board. It is a board that sets rates for provision of service. It does not ration care. It simply does not. I did not vote for the bill because it included the tort reform, and let me tell you why. What the tort reform piece is that it would limit non-compensatory damages to $250,000. Now, that $250,000 number survives from a bill that was passed in 1974, where the same number, $250,000, was set. Now, $250,000 in 1974 is $37,000 today. Now, if someone had proposed in the state of California a $37,000 cap on compensatory damages in 1974, they would have been laughed at. I'm not opposed to a cap. We got to get the right cap. Let me finish.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I also think that it needs to have a provision that waives the cap when the conduct of the physician is egregious. Now, for example, when the physician amputates the wrong leg, I think that that is something that ought to be addressed in a way that goes beyond the cap. If we can craft a law that is more balanced, recognizes the difficulties that families ensue or encounter by having a cap that would be as low as the equivalent of $37,000, then I would be willing to support that. I will also tell you that the Affordable Care Act, and if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it, has provisions in it that encourage states to look at various ways to deal with medical malpractice reform. And I was part of the group that saw to it that those provisions were in the law.
Yes.
What is your plan to contain rising healthcare costs and prescription costs if you do repeal the Affordable Care Act?
I mean, one way to control costs is to repeal the Affordable Care Act. As far as what to replace it with, there are some components that I would be supportive of keeping. I would be supportive of keeping pre-existing. Please give me an opportunity to answer your question. I would support keeping the coverage of individuals with pre-existing conditions so that they could obtain health care. I would support allowing children to stay on their parents' policies until they're 26. I believe that we could do a better job allowing employers, specifically small businesses, to be able to afford better, more efficient policies for their employees. Allowing the pooling of policies because larger businesses are able to get more cost-efficient, better policies for their employees because they have more employees that they're trying to cover. We need to do more to improve the portability of policies across state lines. We need to improve our Medicaid system. Individuals on Medicaid are not going into the workforce because they risk losing their Medicaid coverage. There are ways to reform Medicaid to allow individuals to obtain better policies for their families and in a way that they could go into the workforce and not risk losing their coverage. One of the key ways that Obamacare is expanding the amount of people covered is by expanding Medicaid. Now, New York State already has a much more expansive Medicaid system than most other states. We have one of the most, if not the most, costly, expansive Medicaid systems in the entire country. You can also better utilize the tax code for individuals who are struggling to make ends meet, who are having trouble finding the right policy for their family, affording it, to be able to offer them the right incentives through the tax code for them to be able to better afford policies, specifically before they are taxed on the income that they earn. There are different proposals that are being introduced right now. One is by Congressman Ted Poe, another one by Congressman Tom Price, another one by Senator Tom Coburn. I think it's important that regardless of what happens on November 4th, whether Republicans win, Democrats win, Obamacare needs to be fixed. There are a lot of people who, you could hear one story from a person who says Obamacare has helped me, and then I hear many others from folks who they had their policies canceled, or they had lost their doctors, or to the one gentleman's question about tort reform. We have OBGYNs here on the South Fork having to pay $225,000 a year for their medical malpractice rates, reducing their scope of practice, moving out of the area altogether because they have to make that much money just to pay their malpractice rates. So there is a need for tort reform. And again, it doesn't matter whether you are Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. There are ways to improve healthcare here in this country. We might have a disagreement of opinion, but that's okay. We need to sit down at the table and see where we can find common ground. Regardless of anything that happened in the past at any point, there are ideas that need to be debated to see how we can improve healthcare here in this country.
Okay, we're going to try to cut it a little bit, but two more questions maybe. This gentleman? I use the term loosely.
My name is Ty Brodsky. I live in Montauk. As probably a very stubborn, still surviving member of the Veterans Forces of World War II, I've been listening to I'm listening to the comments, and I'm embarrassed with regard to medical and other care for veterans with the bills that are in Congress today. I'm ashamed, and pardon me, Tim, I'm angry, because I know when I got out of service, I couldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for government help. And I still remember the coal miners wheeling their baby carts at GW in the quadrangles, coming out of the mill, being supported by the government for their education. And they became great leaders today. And I listen, and you're not answering a question, Mr. Sultan. What would you do to correct the stalling and the holdback of the bill that Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer and Feinstein put up, and there's big bipartisan support, but it's being blocked. The budget bill that takes care of an increase, the increase nobody has spoken about. The returning veterans and the veterans who are in medical facilities today need an increase in their spending, in their benefits. And nobody has answered that. What would you do to right that wrong? Because it's in the Republicans who are holding this up.
First off, thank you for your service and being part of our nation's greatest generation. What branch?
Navy.
Navy. All right. Go Army. That's good.
Marine Corps.
You know, I strongly believe that we need to do more to better, more appropriately fund and operate our VA. Our VA, we have different hospitals all across this country. Some are offering better care than others. You have some leadership failures, at some very bad leadership failures at some hospitals around the country. Fortunately, the Northport VA is not one of the hospitals that came up on the lists of where we were having veterans literally dying on secret wait lists. Fortunately, Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, we're trying to work through some of those leadership challenges. The VA director was replaced. That was important. The VA needs to have more funding to upgrade their technology, because they are still processing a lot of their disability claims through paper, hundreds of thousands of disability claims, people waiting years in order to be able to get coverage. There's also a vacuum with regards to covering people with mental health challenges, coming home with post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury. You go to get medical care in the military, and that's where my health care is from. I use TRICARE personally. I'm very familiar with the system. You have a headache, you're having a bad day, or you're missing a limb, Tylenol with codeine. I'm telling you, it's amazing. Like you go to, instead of going to PT in the morning, you're going for medical help, Tylenol with codeine. There are individuals who have mental health challenges who are being medicated as opposed to getting some other very important peer support is one model that works. Letting our veterans know that they're not alone. They feel isolated and alone because their family and their friends, people at work do not understand and appreciate what they are going through. And there needs to be more work, better communication and networking between the federal government through the VAs, with local county veteran service offices, through non-for-profits, through community groups who want to help our veterans so people know where to go. If you're active in a VFW or an American Legion, the average age keeps on getting larger, and we have all these vets coming home who are not getting involved in their local vets community. Suffolk County has the second highest vets population of any county in the entire country. With regards to funding, I would be supportive of providing more funding to better help our veterans who are both returning home and for individuals such as yourself who are part of our nation's greatest generation who need that help, who need cost of living increases. We have veterans overseas who are getting their pink slips while they are deployed. You have people back at home who are seeing their basic housing allowance reduced. You can make the military appropriations much more efficient. There's money to be saved, especially with defense contracting, and to drive money where it matters most to individuals like you.
I would just like to ask you if you would mind if you now switch over to the Assemblyman and the State Senator and give them a chance, and then we can come back to the Congressman if they are hopefully willing to stay a little longer. So I would, based on that,